Hello dear viewers, a very warm welcome to our channel. It's very good to have you here. In this video, we are going to have a look at principle of operation of a 4-speed manual transmission. The transmission gearbox is there to allow the vehicle to be driven at different gear ratios so that the vehicle can be driven at different speed and torque combination. When you look at this particular gear, we have forward 4 speeds and 1 reverse speed. When the smaller gear is driving a larger gear, speed will be reduced and torque will be multiplied. So, when you look at the power flow, right here we have the clutch. The clutch is there to manually disconnect power flow into the gearbox. So whenever you are going to make gear change, whenever you are going to shift gear, power coming from the engine has to be disconnected, and that is done by the clutch. So this red part and the white part, this right here is the clutch disc. Right here we have the clutch cover and the pressure plate assembly. Right here we have the release bearing. When the release bearing is forced this direction, it will disconnect the power that is clapping this white friction disc onto the flywheel. That way, power flow from the engine will be temporarily disconnected. And when you gradually release the clutch pedal, when you let go of the clutch pedal gradually, this will pick up speed by connecting the friction disc onto the flywheel, and it will be sandwiched between the pressure plate and onto the flywheel. So when the friction disc is pressed between the pressure plate, this right here is the pressure plate, and the flywheel, the black part, that will transmit power. But when the force that is clapping the friction disc, sandwiching it in between these two components is get disconnected, that is when power flow is interrupted. Now, for this particular transmission, we have 4 forward speed and 1 reverse speed. Right here, when we look at the component, the shaft that is bringing power from the clutch into the transmission is called the input shaft. This gear is connected to the input shaft, and the other end is splined onto the clutch hub in here. So it will receive power from the clutch disc and bring it into the transmission. So that right here is called the input shaft. The input shaft on this particular transmission is in constant connection to the counter shaft. This is a counter shaft with multiple counter gears. The counter shaft is rotating in opposite direction to the input shaft. Because this is a gear connection, it will be rotating in opposite direction to the input shaft. So this is the counter shaft. There is another shaft that is taking power out from the transmission. We call it the output shaft. And back in there is an idler gear. There is a shaft on which the idler gear is sliding for reverse, and that is the idler reverse shaft. So that is the reverse idler shaft. So these are some of the basic shafts: input shaft, counter shaft, the output shaft, and right back there we have the reverse idler shaft. Now when you look at the gear combination, when a smaller gear on the counter shaft is driving a larger gear on the output shaft, we have torque multiplication. We have reduced speed because the smaller gear has to turn multiple times in order to rotate the larger gear once. It has to rotate multiple times. That will reduce speed. It will multiply torque. Now, for this particular gear, for example, the lowest gear on the counter shaft belongs to first gear. So this will be first gear, counter gear for first speed gear. And then looking at the size, this will be second speed gear, and this will be the third gear. Fourth gear will be direct drive. When you look at the speed gears on the output shaft, the speed gears on the output shaft actually are supported on a roller bearing. So if I move, for example, if I move the output shaft, as you can see now, I'm moving the output shaft by simply rotating this. I'm moving the output shaft. Only those parts that are rotating now are in constant connection to the output shaft. Those parts that are rotating as I turn the output shaft are splined to the output shaft. The other parts, like these speed gears, are supported on roller bearing. So rotating this speed gear does not necessarily engage this gear to the output shaft. So only this shift mechanisms, there is a shift sleeve mechanism right here, there is a shift sleeve mechanism, there is a shift gear that is splined to the output shaft. Only these parts are in constant mesh to the output part. So the output shaft is in constant mesh to only those parts. When speed is selected, however, for example, if I slide this larger gear and engage it to the counter, and that will transmit power from the input to the counter shaft, from the counter shaft through this speed gear, it will transfer power to this gear. That will be first gear. If power is taken from here, by simply connecting, this is in constant mesh, by simply sliding this shift sleeve and engaging it to on this speed gear dot this, when engaging this, when this is sliding and connecting these two parts, that will transmit power for the second speed gear. And if I shift this assembly and engage onto this third speed gear, by simply sliding this shifter and engaging onto this speed gear, only then I can connect this moving part to the speed gear, and that will be third gear. And by simply shifting this assembly to this direction, I can select fourth gear. Fourth gear is actually a direct drive. Now look, when the engine is turning, look what is happening when the engine is turning. Counter gears are in constant mesh to the input, so they are always rotating as long as the engine is running. The speed gears on the output shaft, they are also running because they are supported on a roller bearing. But as you can see, the output shaft is not turning. Why? Because it is not selected, because the speed gears are supported on a roller bearing and no gear is selected, the output shaft is not running. Now this gear, this particular gear is called the neutral gear. Neutral gear is when engine is running, vehicle is not moving. Why? Because no gear is selected. This is called the neutral gear. Now, let's go ahead and select first gear, for example. As I mentioned earlier, when selecting first gear, by simply sliding this gear and engaging it to this smaller counter shaft gear, I can transmit power. That will be first gear. Let's go ahead and select it. For this, you have to press the clutch pedal. Clutch pedal pressing will temporarily disconnect power flow. On cars, it has to be pressed. Let's go ahead and bring this and engage it in here. Look, see? Now by simply sliding this gear and engaging it to the first speed gear, now the output shaft is rotating. As you can see, the output shaft has started turning at lower speed. Now power is coming from the clutch. It will come through the input shaft to go to the counter shaft. And because the smallest gear on the counter shaft is now engaged to a larger gear on the output shaft assembly, this is first gear. So the vehicle is now being driven on first gear. As you can see, it is running on low speed. That will multiply torque. Now this one is used when you want to start moving your vehicle from a stationary position. So first gear has a larger torque. If I shift this out by using this linkage, if I shift this out, it will go back to neutral. Let's go ahead and do that. Look, for example, shifting it out. Now the transmission is back to neutral. When we want to shift to second gear, as I've said earlier, the smallest gear belongs to first gear, and then the second smaller gear is this gear. If I shift this sleeve and engage it to this speed gear, that will be second gear. Let's go ahead and engage that. Look right here. Look what is happening right here. See? By simply sliding this assembly, by moving the gear selector, now we are taking power from this speed gear. From the engine, power will come to the counter shaft. Then from this speed gear, it will go to the second speed gear on the output shaft. And through this sleeve, now power is being supplied to the output shaft. Now vehicle is being driven on second gear. Now, in order to engage third gear, you have to come back to neutral first by simply removing this from engagement. Now we are on neutral. Then for third gear, by simply moving this lever to this direction, I can take power. I can tap power from this speed gear. So by simply engaging right here, we can select the third speed gear. Third gear will be like so. look at here, right here, by simply moving this, I can engage third gear. Look at that. See? Now, vehicle is being driven on third gear. As you can see, the output speed is now increasing because we have increased the gear ratio. The gear ratio on the counter shaft is going up. A larger gear, comparatively a larger gear on the counter shaft is driving a gear on the output shaft, so the output speed is increasing. Power is coming from the input to the counter shaft. From this gear, it will go to the third speed gear on the output shaft, and then from there, through this sleeve assembly, it is now connected to the output shaft, so the vehicle is being driven on third gear now. Fourth gear is usually a direct drive, so by simply sliding this, I can engage it to right here. If you can see, fourth gear is right here. Shifter sleeve assembly is right there. By simply engaging this gear, we can select fourth gear. Let's go ahead and do that. From third gear, bring it back to neutral, and then moving forward this assembly will engage fourth gear. Just have a look at here. Look what is happening. Now this is fourth gear. Not fully inserted. This is now fourth gear. Now, because of this engagement, the output shaft is directly connected to the input shaft. So there is no need of using the counter shaft. This is why we call it a direct drive. Power from the clutch will directly go to the input. From the input shaft, it will directly go to the sleeve, and then from there, it will directly go to the output shaft. So the fourth gear is a direct drive. Now you might have noticed when selecting gear, because this is a demonstration gearbox and it is running at low RPM, we did not use clutch. But when it comes to the actual vehicle, because transmission and clutch assembly all are running at high speed, you have to use the clutch to temporarily disconnect power flow. So this is fourth gear. Now we are back to neutral. Now, when we want to select reverse gear, all we have to do is we have to introduce an idler gear in order to change direction of travel. In order to change direction, idler gear has to be introduced. If you see back there, there is an idler gear. Right there, there is an idler gear. By simply sliding the idler gear to this direction and connecting the idler gear partly to this small gear and partly to this larger gear, we can introduce a third gear in the power flow. So power from the input will come to the counter shaft. From the counter shaft, first speed gear, it will go to the idler, and from the idler, it will come to the output shaft of the transmission. So the idea is like this. Just think of it like here. Let's say this is one piece of the idler. It will be placed in such a fashion. Look, simply placing it in such a fashion. If I place it in such a fashion, it is partly connected to first gear. Look, if I place it in such a fashion, part of the idler gear is connected to this gear, first speed gear, and part of that is, as you can see, is now connected to the output. That is the duty of the idler gear. So when we engage reverse gear, the idler, it is a long gear. It will slide and it will mesh partly with this speed gear and partly with the output shaft gear. So by doing so, we can introduce an idler gear that will change direction of power flow. Let's go ahead and do that. Let's start the vehicle first. Look, now, look when reverse is selected. See? Now the idler gear is partly resting on this gear. You see the oil on this side of the gear and partly engaged to the speed gear of gear number 1. That is why we are using a spur gear instead of helical gears like this. We are using spur gears because the idler has to slide and engage. And always make sure that the vehicle is kept stationary when selecting reverse gear, because these spur gears, they will engage only when there is no transmission of power, when there is power, when power is fully disconnected. Otherwise, if it is moving at high speed, engaging this gear will be difficult. it will cause gear clash. Now, as you can see, this is running in reverse direction to the other speed gears. Why? Because it is being driven by an idler gear. Power flow is now coming from the clutch through the input shaft. It will go to the counter. From this smallest gear, it will go to the idler gear, and from the idler gear, it will go to the output speed gear for speed number 1. So this is how reverse gear is selected on this transmission. And as you can see, the vehicle transmission is now being driven on reverse direction. Look, power will come from the gearbox. It will come to the propeller shaft. We have the slip joint, universal joints are there, and then it will go to the differential. Now the differential will split power, change the direction of power flow, distribute it to the left and right wheel. Right? Then we have the axle shaft, and finally it will come to the wheel. See? Now because reverse gear is selected, this gear is running in reverse direction. So basically this is how the transmission will be driving your vehicle in different speed and in different direction as well. So this is how the manual transmission operates. Let's go ahead and bring it to neutral by disconnecting the idler gear. Right there, the idler gear can be disconnected by moving it in such a fashion. Now we are on idle. So this is how a 4-speed manual transmission operates. Now in our next video, we'll be looking at the principle of operation of the clutch, how the clutch will transmit power, what are the benefits, and what are some of the uses of a clutch will be discussed in the next video. Stay tuned for that video. If you have any comment, suggestion regarding this video production, leave it in the comments below. And if you have anything that you want to tell us about your experience regarding a manual transmission, just leave a comment. If you like this video, don't forget to smash the like button. Your support will help us grow our channel. And if you enjoy what has been presented, don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you will be supplied with other videos related to car maintenance and some automotive related videos. So this is end of our first video. This will be on manual transmission. That is all we have for you in this presentation. If you enjoy, please don't forget to smash the like button. You can subscribe. Don't forget to like this video if you have benefited from the video itself. So this is simply a 4-speed manual transmission principle of operation. Well, we hope to see you in another video. Until then, stay safe. And as you can see, the transmission is filled with the lubricating oil. Oil is very critical for this type of transmission because these gears are carrying heavy load when the vehicle is being driven. So they need to get lubricated in order to reduce wear, in order to reduce friction, heat generation as a result of friction that will accelerate wear on this component. They need to be well lubricated. So always make sure that your manual transmission is well lubricated and make sure that you follow regular oil replacement. Otherwise, if this oil gets contaminated, it can accelerate wear on the gear pads, and there are bearings that are going to support. The counter shaft is supported at both ends with a bearing. See, ball bearings are there. The input shaft is also supported with an input. Right here, there is a bearing supporting. The other end of the input shaft is to be supported inside the flywheel with a pilot bearing, and the output shaft is also supported with a roller bearing, ball bearing right here. So those bearings also, they need to get lubricated. So lubrication is very crucial and very critical. And every time you select gear, make sure that you are selecting the gear based on the requirement from your engine load. Otherwise, that can cause excessive strain on your manual transmission as well. And also properly use the clutch. Don't ride the clutch. Use it when only planning to shift gears. Don't ride the clutch. That will accelerate wear, and that will cause some type of overheating inside the clutch assembly. That will also shorten the transmission of the life of your transmission as well. As you can see, helical gears are used on majority of the speed gears. Helical gears are quite in operation and they're very capable of transmitting massive power. As you can see, multiple gears are engaged at a time. When it comes to spur gear, however, only one pair of gear is selected when power transmission is there. These are noisy. They are not usually used for other speed gears rather than first gear, reverse, and first gear. Majority of the transmissions are using this type of gear, helical gears. They are quite in operation. More than one gear can engage at a time due to the helix angle and due to the helic formation of the teeth. They have their operation is quieter, and they have good load carrying capacity as well.